Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Viral Hit Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, obviously, this is kind of, a twofold episode because we get introduced to the next opponent that Viral Hit's going up against, but first and foremost, we go through the situation of introducing the new editor. And obviously they try to reach out to their audience, which I love. Once again, Snapper doing what he's doing, where it's like, okay, so how should we go about getting an editor? And then, Snapper shows that he was recording the entire time. It's like, wait, we were recording. It's like, yeah, which is kind of like the worst thing for a live streamer, but it is what it is. But it's like, yeah, reaching out to their audience. It's like, yeah, guys, tell us in the comments, like, what are your qualifications? One person was like, yo, I'm like a 28-year-old who doesn't get his allowance from his mom. One person was like a 41-year-old that's like, I just divorced my wife yesterday. We were estranged for like 18 years or something like that. And just like no one in it, it's like, well, none of these people have any qualifications. And people were like, hey, no, we've got great backgrounds and stuff like that. It's not our fault. Like, once again, that interesting relationship that he has with his audience. And lo and behold, the old man enters the chat and it's like, oh, I can be your editor. Which obviously they're initially like, yeah, but the way he talks, it might be like a very retro style with the editing. So it's like, oh, well, we'll give it a trial run. And so they're going to meet up with him in real life. And lo and behold, I love that initially it's like, oh, like, he kind of presents himself a certain way. And I love that Snapper was like, block him. And it's like, oh, come on, we promised we'd meet with him. And lo and behold, he reveals himself to be, hey, we get the proper name drop. I actually don't know how to properly pronounce her name. That's also another reason why I haven't been saying her name up until now. Because I've read it and I've just never known how to properly pronounce it. I'm going to go with Gail might be how you that might be the pronunciation. I have no idea. But yeah. We find out she is old man in chat. There were hits to it like, oh, like the first time, like one of the notable times that the old man was talking in chat, it like after the end of the fight, it was when Hoban was getting his phone back. Like you see that the end of that altercation, it focuses on like her phone, and then you see her smiling. Once again, you could probably put two and two together, like, wait, is that supposed, but it could just be like, just like Moon Seong like watches the live streams and is a subscriber to the channel too, so you wouldn't put two and two together. But also I was like, yeah, that's the thing I was talking about earlier on of like once they introduce like properly, like, oh my god, old man in the chat, then I was like, oh man, like they are doing the bit. But yeah, it's like, it's how she talks. She speaks a very like old-fashioned, I don't even know if it's dialect, but like an older version of, an old person's version of Korean, because I didn't actually remember the reason why she spoke like that, but they say it's like, oh, she was living abroad and she basically learned how to speak through the internet, but it was like very like I said, I don't know if dialect would be the right word, but it's like that's why she speaks like an old man, and people, it's like, yeah, she's cute, she has a very cute, she's got a reputation for being cute, but she's also kind of ostracized a little bit in school. And I think we'll get into that maybe more in the next episode. Probably not, but they kind of touch on it this episode. But if you do notice, like, it's not like she has any friends she's interacting with. And that's why I think that's what makes the Hoban and Snapper thing so crucial, is that she doesn't really have any friends outside of them, because she was always kind of, like I said, I feel like that's something the story does dive into, but I think it's like a little after she becomes the editor and everything. But yeah, she showcases her skills by like, yeah, it's like, well, first and foremost, Snapper being completely and utterly smitten by her. Like the moment it's like he was like pointing his finger at her, and it's like, oh, and then she touches his finger, and he has the same daydream that Hoban did when him and Boomy touched hands, just grazed hands. And he's like, oh, imagining them, instead of having kids, they have a cute little dog, and the dog's name is Hoban. And it's just like, oh, I love it so much. And you could just hear the shift in the Snapper's voice actor, like when that section, how he does Snapper's voice is supposed to be older, more distinguished, and oh, he's a salary man now. I just love that. But yeah, she showcases her skills by, it's like, oh, I made you an intro, which I was like, wait, did she make them an intro in the webtoon? I mean, it's not like you got like a little peek at it in the show, but it's like, I mean, like, you wouldn't been able to really showcase that in the webtoon. Maybe it's straight out of the webtoon. I just don't, I mean, if it's there, they never make much of a point of it. But I mean, having an intro for like not only the videos, the edited down videos and kind of the highlights, but also like the live streams themselves, kind of, so. But those are neat things, like having that person as an editor, and even like, oh wow, she picked some of the funny comments. It's like, yeah, that's kind of, once again, that is one of the fundamental elements of this series, is some of the comments from like the viral hit community. So. And also, she also showcased, like, what was it, from episode 4, the humiliation episode, where, like, it's like, oh, we kind of have to blur and censor some of that. It's like, oh, who knew you had so much hair down there, and, oh, your buttocks, and he was like, all right, you're hired, because Snapper was wanting to hire her on the spot. But it's like, yeah, she welcome aboard the team and stuff. And this is a neat thing. They don't talk about it. They show you, but they don't really talk about it. They do hide, once again, I'm just going to go with my pronunciation of it, Gail, like, they hide her identity. I don't remember if they ever bothered explaining why. I'm, like, legitimately don't remember them ever explaining why they did that. Like, she's the only person in the crew that, oh yeah, there will be other people who join, I won't say who, but yeah, like, it is weird because like she's the only one who they identity, because it becomes a recurring bit where like some of the audience is like, wait, who's that voice? Is that editor? Why don't you put her on the camera? Like, let's see what the editor looks like. But yeah, they hide her identity in it. Like, I'm trying to think even where I'm at in the story, like, to let you know where I'm. Like I said, I still haven't picked it up in a while, but basically there's a thing happening between Gale and Hoban, and it's going to cause some complications in other aspects of his life. I haven't deep dived into that part of the story yet. I'm only like on the cusp of, oh yeah, we're setting up a thing between Gale and Hoban, and I'll kind of leave it at that for no spoilers. But I'm trying to remember. I think by that point they know what she looks like on camera, because I mean they would need to, considering what that storyline's heading and the direction it's heading. But like, I think, yeah, it takes a long time before you find like the audience knows what she looks like. So just kind of a neat element of kind of a portion of this episode revolving around that. And the other portion is introducing us to our next basically big bad, and it's Taehoon, and makes you realize, oh cool, Taehoon, you thought Parko was a dick? Taehoon's a whole other savage piece of shit, So it's like, also there's this bit which it's actually sad with extra context. There's this thing Taehoon does repeatedly throughout this episode. It's a recurring element to his character. It's almost like a catchphrase where he basically asks for money. Obviously, because this is an Japanese animation, they like change the currency. But it's like, ain't it like, I can't remember. I don't remember the total off the top of my head. Whether, like, I can't remember if it was either like 500 or 5,000 won. Wasn't it something like that? I can't remember. But he's only like at least translated to yen, it's only like 100 yen apparently. I don't know. Either way, the thing is, no spoilers. It's so interesting knowing the backstory to that. It takes a while, but it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting there to be such a legitimately depressing backstory to why he does that, like the significance of that. So, and it also, like, it makes looking at Taehoon's, like, he's still a garbage piece of shit person for doing what he's doing, but now you also look at it sympathetically, because not only the money amount he asks, but even the way he goes about bullying people. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to mess you up. I'm going to mess up your friend and basically hold them hostage and beat the crap out of them until you cave. I want you to feel hopeless and powerless. And it's like, we know what, if you've read enough of Viral Hit, you know what that stems from. So going back to this storyline hit so hard, because also, like, right, you're like, oh wow, he's a piece of shit, but you're also like, but you're a lot more sympathetic to him knowing his backstory. So it makes viewing him at this point in the story so interesting, because you're like, oh, you suck so much. It's like, right, I forgot how much of a garbage, like, he's still kind of an asshole later in the story, but not to this extent. And so it just makes it that much more tragic when you're like, But either way, it's like, yeah, he beats people up and just keeps asking for money. Joey's playing the arcade. I love, like, the intersection between that, though. It's like Boomy watching the videos, like, oh my god, they introduced the editor, which she's like, cool. you got a lot of time, you got time to spend on your YouTube account, but you're not going to hit me up. And, she's like, you're not answering my calls and stuff. It's like, to be fair, it's like the last time he interacted with Boomy was episode 4, because he's avoided her like crazy. I mean, for one, he was doing all his training, but also like he still can't bring himself to be around her, because he's still like, right, I was humiliated. I showed you the worst possible side of myself. So he hasn't really kind of gotten over that. I mean, he just kind of took those steps forward to taking some of his own power back by beating up Portugal. So it's like, it's that, but that's just kind of letting you know where, I thought that was kind of neat. Like, once again, letting you know where things stand. I believe it worked out like that. I mean, once again, like, this seems like a one-to-one to the webtoon for the most part, in a lot of its presentation and stuff. So I'm sure that intersection between, like, oh, here's someone connected to Hoban who ends up introducing being our first viewpoint to Taehoon, But yeah, I mean, they actually had a more direct connection, because someone hit Snapper up about Taehoon and sending information. It's like, hey, let's get you guys to take this guy down, which Snapper's all about it, because he's thinking like, why, Taekwondo, what does that mean? It's nothing, kind of being very dismissive of it, yada yada yada. It's like, all you have to do is grab the person's legs, because it's all about kicks and stuff. But then Gail had to be like, you darn whippersnappers, you young kids these days have no idea. And she's like, right, there's 2 different types of Taekwondo. There's the sport Taekwondo, which is all about like, okay, like, the technicalness of it, getting points and stuff. And then there's actual street fighting combat Taekwondo, which, it's like, right, and, the back kick being like the super move and stuff. So it's like, cool. Hoban is going up against a pretty tough person who's going through some proper training. He isn't just an amateur. He is a professional fighter in a lot of sense, so... But it's like, yeah, Snapper made all that decision like early on, and the rest of I love later on people are calling him out like, oh, are you scared now? He's like, yes, of course I'm scared. And it's like, oh well, Hoban's name is going to be written on his will and stuff like that, like R.I.P. like type of vibe when it comes to Hoban. I even love that it's kind of like, oh yeah, they even say later on, it's like, oh yeah, the person that gave them information about. Because a person who, it's like, right, do you want to let that person who, like, took a chance, build up all this courage to send you Taehoon's information? Are you going to let it go to waste? Because it's pretty obvious who sent you that info, because you see a video of Taehoon beating up someone in his classroom for, like, oh, I want your sneakers. But he doesn't really want what he's asking for. It's just a means of, it's just part of his psychological thing. Like, once again, he is unhinged psychopathic. And it's just like, yeah, you get a little showcase of his power of like, yeah, he's super fast and he's super strong. As, what was that line? Yes, Taekwondo is good. But Gail had kind of explained like, a Muay Thai fighter strike versus someone who does capoeira versus a Taekwondo person. And it's like the speed and strength is on its own level. So... you have to be careful about that. The people that she was like, oh yeah, like MMA fighters incorporated stuff. And we saw 2 people. I'm like, is that supposed to be like Anderson Silva and... God. I'm not an MMA person. I'm not a sports dude in general, but Conor McGregor. You won't see the tattoos, but I'm like, I don't know if that's what that's supposed to be. Like, I don't know if that's supposed to be Anderson Silva and like Conor McGregor like stand-ins, just like that's supposed to be like a, once again, Mike Tyson stand-in. So I don't know. But Hoban kind of has no reason to personally go after Taehoon, because he's like, yeah, like I'm a coward, dude. Like, yeah, I went out to Paco because that was personal, but also it's like at the same time, like I'm not the guy that goes out just like fighting for justice. Yeah, it's kind of part of the brand of like calling people out, but it's like, yeah, but it probably usually goes with the hand of, oh, it's usually someone directly connected. I talked about this. I believe I don't think it was post. Like I said, I couldn't remember if it was pre them getting Gail as an editor, or was it post her being the editor. But I do believe it was before the Taehoon thing, because I think I brought this up last episode. But there is another group they go after, like another like group that they call out. I want to say, yeah, it was definitely before Taehoon. Like I said, I just can't remember if it was before they got their editor or not. I want to say it was before, but it might have been after. because it's a storyline, not unless they end up saving it for later. It could come up in episode 7, but I'd assume it wouldn't. I'd assume we're not. I guess they're just not adapting it. But there's a group of like other YouTubers that they go up against. I think they're a prank channel, if I remember correctly, that they go up against, and they work with Rumi. So it's kind of sad because we're not getting that storyline. We're getting a little less Rumi because of it too. So, but obviously there's a lot more, like plenty of story like play around with Rumi later on that really circles and like has her as a focal point. But either way, it was just kind of another reminder of like, oh, it just seemed like we're just skipping over that story beat. I mean, it's just like maybe like once again, it's just kind of like a building up their reputation more and just kind of expanding on like some character developments and stuff like that, pushing the viral hit brand a little bit more. But like I said, we're kind of boss rushing this a little bit, going from Paco to immediately jumping into Taehoon rather than kind of having that break in between. So it kind of makes you wonder going forward, like, will they do that? Because like there's not too many small channel things that they deal with. It typically it's kind of a boss rush for most instances that I can think of off the top of my head. What would be considered like boss rushes most of the time. I think that might be one of the only times. Maybe that'd also be another reason why they decided to cut it too. I mean, just for time and stuff like that and budget and all that. But also it could just be like, right, it doesn't fit the narrative. Like, because like I feel like everything else in the story has always been boss rush, boss. It's rarely been. There's only like one other occasion where I can think of like, oh, it's small fry people. It's usually like a boss rush type of thing. But either way, tangents and all that aside. Snapper wanted to get some first-hand footage of keeping an eye on Taehoon, and he almost gets caught. And I love that perspective where it's like, oh yeah, he comes to like, I love that like subterfuge of like, yeah, it's like, oh, like I almost got caught. It's like, oh, you need to be more careful in the future. Ha 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 ha. And then you see that it's Taehoon standing right in front of them because he threatened Snapper and followed. Either he followed Snapper here or he threatened him and take him. It's like, oh, take me to Hoban. So they're trying to be like, oh yeah, like, you know, oh god, what are we gonna do? We got to get a way out of this situation. But then like Gail shows up and she's like, oh, like how dare you do that? And then she stops herself and kicks the rock and she's like, yeah, you big old thug. Because Hoban's like, oh my god, you're just like us. Basically, you're in the coward category. You were coming here being all big and tough until you saw it was Taehoon. And I love there's this little line of dialogue where she's like, you're lucky. You better be careful. I'm gonna call my dad. Which I was like, ooh. Nice. Nice. Just because you're like, right, that it seems, it's such a one-off dialogue thing. You're like, oh, it's insignificant. You're just like, oh, she's scared. And she's like, yeah, you don't want to get my dad involved. But it's like, oh, interesting. Got to plant those seeds earlier, you know? So, but yeah, they're like, yeah, we're just capturing, like, if you're fighting and stuff like that. Oh, that's all we'll do. We'll delete the video and we'll be going on our way. It's like, well, you're viral hit, aren't you? You're like, fuck, he knows who we are. And he's like, oh, weren't you guys threatening to beat me up? And he's like, okay, cool. So you want me to leave you alone? All you have to do is hand over your YouTube channel. And he proceeds to hit Snapper with the kick. It's like, yeah, Snapper ends up being the sacrificial lamb a lot and ends up being the one. He takes the brunt of it. So now it's like, cool, hand over your YouTube channel. By the way, do you have 100 yen? I mean, because the last guy, he was beating it up. He was like, oh, do you have 100 yen? Okay, give me that. You know, do you have 10,000? Do you have 1,000,000? And kept, like, boosting up the price. So it's like, yeah. I think the title of this episode is literally called The Devil, just because, like, that's who Taehoon is. And he's that scary guy. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. The next episode's already out because I've gotten to this so late. In fact, like in the next day or two, like the season finale is coming out. But yeah, hopefully I'm able to kind of jump on that immediately. But I'm excited to see where episode 7 takes us with all of this. Obviously I have a pretty good idea, but I'm trying to remember how everything plays out. But I'm sure most of that's going to be obviously safe for the season finale. So, but really that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.